Today we are going to be talking about the possibility. Is it possible to do country living and still be able to do the work? That was the primary request, but we are going to extend that and see how country living is connected to the gospel, the everlasting gospel, the loud cry, especially of the third angel's message. I wanted to read a couple of things before I actually go into the presentation. And I'm going to be reading from this book, Country Living by Sister White, if you can see it, Country Living. I'll just read a couple of statements just as a preamble. It says here, it's chapter 6, colonizing at institutional centers. And the subheading is where there is an opening for a livelihood. Where there is an opening for a livelihood. The lay members of our churches can accomplish a work which as yet they have scarcely begun. None should move into new places merely for the sake of worldly advantage. But where there is an opening to obtain a livelihood, let families that are well grounded in truth enter, one or two families in a place to work as missionaries. They should feel the love of souls, a burden of labor for them, and should make it a study how to bring them into truth. They can distribute our publications, holding meetings in their homes, become acquainted with their neighbors, and invite them to come to these meetings. Thus, they can let the light shine in good works. That's from Testimonies for the Church, Volume 8, page 244 and 245. Published in 1904. So Sister White is saying we should not just move into the country for advantages, for worldly advantages, but we should be moving there to do a work, the work of evangelism. I've got another one that I would like to pick out from here. And let me see if I can find it quickly. It's chapter 7, the next chapter. To help open the way. More and more, as time advances, people will have to leave the cities. For years, we have been instructed that our brethren and sisters, and especially families with children, should plan to leave the cities as the way opens before them to do so. Many will have to labor earnestly and help open the way. But until it is possible for them to leave, so long as they remain, they should be most active in doing missionary work, however limited their sphere of influence may be. And this is from Review and Herald, September 27, 1906. So again, Sister White is saying, we may not be able to live all at the same time, but as the way opens, before the way opens, we should be occupying meaningfully where we are. And no matter how big or small our sphere of influence may be, it is our duty and our privilege to be doing evangelistical work wherever we are in the cities before the actual move. And I'm going to put this to the side. And in fact, I am not going to be speaking a lot from the Spirit of Prophecy today, only because part of the reason why I have had to put a little bit of an addition to the requested topic is because we've been holding these country living seminars testimonies particularly, some people have been even questioning the veracity of the notion of country living. Some of them are even Adventists who don't believe that we should be doing this, but also in certain circles that I've been mingling with, people in the evangelical and Catholic world don't seem to understand this. Some of them have been on some of our sessions that they are pretty much asking the question, is it necessary? Is it a requirement at all? So I'm hoping by God's grace that I'll be able to address that. But before I do, I would like to share my screen. The rest of it, I'm going to speak from the phone because I didn't get a chance to put everything on the slide. But part of what we can be doing as we are still in these places, some of us are still in the cities, and I am. What we can be doing is to make the most of the opportunity that God is presenting to us, and that's we can do evangelism where we are, but also we can we can start to prepare for country living by doing gardening. We can do gardening and agriculture, horticulture and agriculture to sharpen our skills, those who have any skills, but also those who don't have those skills to learn. And for a time now, we have been trying to do that. I'm just going to show you what we've been doing in the garden lately, which is a preparation for country living. So that's just this year. That was a couple of weeks ago. This is rape. There's quite a lot of it. I've just thinned it out a little bit so that the crops can breathe. But these leafy greens are really good, and especially with some of the malnutrition that we suffer from the cities, this is a good source of magnesium and zinc, but also all the other major nutrients, including actual proteins and vitamins and minerals. So these are really good leafy greens. I literally had to slash back so that it can grow with much more vigor and bigger plants. And I've got here, this is a single bed. I think it's just been doubled up of cauliflower. It is the purple cauliflower, the purple sprouting cauliflower. And this is a bed of cabbages. I did mix a little bit as an insurance with kale. There's a purple kale and a greenish green kale on the sidelines. But yeah, this is what we have grown, and the netting is just for the butterflies. As you all may all know, that butterflies do love brassicas, especially cabbages. And this is what keeps coming back. I don't know if anyone can identify it from here, but this is callaloo. I think it's a native and endemic in the Caribbean and in Africa and places in Asia. It's one of the few varieties of callaloo. This is very small leaves, quite nice and tasty, and very nutritious. I just literally get the seed there and let it come back on its own every season. So I disturb the place very little, and doesn't even require a lot of care. It's like a weed, pretty much. And very highly nutritious. We have been enjoying this. In fact, this is much more tastier than spinach, although it has a similar sort of consistency. And this is again me experimenting with weeds and volunteers. What you see there are mustard greens, and those are actually weeds. But instead of chopping them down, just let them flourish for a bit, and because they grow very quickly, get them out of the way. They may disturb the actual crop for a short time, which is kale, as you can see. But once you get them out of the way, the kale will then pick up with all the sunshine and all. It's also grown in Africa. I think in Zimbabwe, in the Shona language, they call it tsunga, but it's called mustard leafy greens. And because we allow it to flower, instead of harvesting the actual seeds, we just let them, for a few years now, I've been letting them just do whatever they want, and they'll come back the next season. And they're quite hardy. They have never been affected by the winter. We literally just eat it. It's just like kale, like cabbage. It's one of the brassica families. It is a brassica, and this one is quite spicy. It's got a tangy taste to it, and a very nice flavor to it. So again, that's just variety. But the actual crop here is not the mustard, and it grows very fast, as you can see. It grew very fast and overtook the kale. Now I've actually ripped it, and the kale is not doing so badly. But obviously, as you can appreciate, this is competition for nutrients, competition for sunlight. So there's competition underground and overground as well for nutrients, for light, for everything. So that might slow down your other crop, but it's a compromise because in return you get 2 crops for 1. Well, that's what I did anyway. On the right, you've already seen what's on the left of the screen. On the right, that's it's called flower sprout. Again, it's another brassica. They're probably just breeding these things. Technically, these are all just cabbages, but they have got slight variations, and obviously that would determine the nutritional value as well. That there will be variations in the nutritional value. So that is the one I showed you earlier. I think this is a double up, which is the cauliflower, but in that bed is a little bit of a mixture of broccoli on the sides, which was not doing too badly. I mean, too good either. And it's been suffering the blight of. We've got quite a bit of slugs and snails, and that's slug damage. But we don't tend to control a lot of slugs. We just leave it to nature as much as possible, unless if it's something pretty vulnerable. Occasionally, I put. I've been experimenting with what do you call it? There's a concoction that I was making out of garlic and onions and a bit of salt, a little bit of oil, olive oil, just to bind it. And it seems to be doing the job. But that was something that I just came up with. And that's because I had some seedlings that were very poor. Although I didn't trust it too much, I ended up doing a chemical treatment as well, which is not the best. And this is cabbages. They are just nearly bulbing. So that's what's in the garden at present. We actually did another video for years now, close to 10 years. We've just been taking cardboard boxes that we take from the mission field, and we've been piling them in the garden. Just a backstory. This garden, the soil that you see is what we have had to buy in and to literally culture it, because the garden has had a lot of rubble in it, and it was very poor soils. You couldn't grow on it. But basically, we managed to create a substrate to grow crops, and it's been very good to us thus far. That's the same one you've seen here. There is few perspectives, and that is what we can begin to do. Buying trees, growing trees, And these trees, I've decided not to put them in the ground with the view that we may be able to transfer them to wherever we are going to find ourselves by God's grace. And this year, it's fruited quite a lot. It's been here for more than a couple of years, and managed to feed it and top up the nutrition. And these are fruits that are actually just about to ripen. And that's a little bit of a video of it. It's quite laden with cherries. And that little shed is a part of our storage of the books, the book ministry. And what we tend to do as well, that is actually different varieties of lettuces in the container. So you're maximizing on the actual space. And it's almost like a cover crop in a sense. Again, I use those. And there's only about 5 of these, and they're enough to last us the whole growing season. I once did 2 beds of lettuce and found out that it was way too much for us. Even these 5 containers that you have seen, they don't seem to, we don't seem to finish them. And that what you are seeing is a grapevine. Again, these are garlics, elephant garlics and normal garlics. They were harvested. We shared quite a lot of them. This is what is just remaining. For the elephant garlics, we literally uprooted them because we wanted to use the space. But the whole idea is they will mature and drain all the chlorophyll from the leaves and pack it into the bulbs. And this is what you are seeing in pictures. Again, this is today, whereas pictures that you saw weeks ago, and these things grow very fast because it's summer. On the sides of the beds, we have put quite a few. I don't know if you noticed it moving quite quickly. I don't want to be messing around with the video, but we've been putting quite a lot of, what do you call them? Herbs. So we got different herbs, and that's a pumpkin plant. This year it's not doing very well yet. The weather has not been very conducive just yet, but it's early days. If the sun comes up, they do like a lot of sun, the pumpkins do. That's fennel on the side of the bed, and it's now a well-established plant. Again, that's for our medication. I've done the capital crime of mixing some of the squashes. Those are actually butternut squashes, and that's lemon balm, oregano on the bedside, and that's a bit of a parsley herb, a bit of sunflowers, and then again this is the callaloo, and that was harvested last week and was shared with quite a few people. I think Brother Ernest got a little bit of it. I didn't tell him. It was a little bit of a surprise. And then that's the rape, kale. And this is where I was saying I've used a bit of chemicals. That little herb that you saw flush, there was hyssop, the hyssop blue. The hyssop is quite an interesting herb for me because it is the one that was offered with the red heifer in the red heifer offering sacrifice, which was a very rare sacrifice to be given. And it was given in conjunction, it was sacrificed in conjunction with the biggest of the plant world, which was cedar. And that was just an object lesson that Christ died for all things big and small. And it was given outside the city in a barren land, also showing that Christ died even for the worthless people in the world. This is the cabbages. Yeah, I was saying all the cardboard that we have ever produced, we try to take it back and we use it as a weed suppressant, but it breaks down into the soil, and also the microbial populations, especially the worms, the earthworms, love they love what do you call it, the cardboard, and that retains moisture. Overall, the long and the short of it is, it's been a blessing to actually use the cardboard, because it is a positive in every respect. It stops the winds coming through. It keeps the moisture, and it promotes both the microbial and the macrobial populations of the soil, which we benefited from. So that's us practicing. I'm not a total novice to, like I said, I grew up in the country. I have studied a bit of agriculture, and I understand a bit of horticulture, but it's still a privilege, especially in a different environment like this, to practice, and we never stop learning. There is a lot more to be learned. In fact, we have not done the best of what we need to do. So that's enough about the practice, the gardening. But I'd like to take this opportunity maybe to just pray and start the actual presentation that I intended to share. Shall we pray? Heavenly Father, I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to share with the brethren. I am worse than even Moses. Moses used to have a stutter and a matter, and I am not eloquent at all. And without you, I'm nothing. So take control of my mind, take control of my tongue. And you have never gathered your people and left them to go away empty. So I pray that may I be that nail where your image is going to, and your portrait is going to be hung. May the brethren be blessed by the words you are going to provide. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Yeah. Today we are going to be talking about the connection between country living and the gospel. Yes, the primary being, is it possible to do evangelism in the country? I think there's a short answer. It's a definite, but we are going to see more than just a possibility. But we are also going to make a connection with the everlasting gospel, Revelation chapter 14 from verse 6, the three angels' message, the everlasting gospel, but especially making the connection to the actual final loud cry of the third angel, which we find in Revelation 18. Is there any actual connection between the two? But in order to do this, I've been inspired to go throughout the Bible, from Genesis to Revelation, doing a scoping exercise of how the connection to country living is. So we're going to start from the beginning. Genesis chapter 1, God put Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, and that was his perfect plan for humanity. Eden and the work of Eden was given to our forefathers, Adam and Eve, before there was sin. It was a perfect plan that God had Eve and Adam not yielded to the devil. They were supposed to live forever in the garden. In fact, let me just read it. Genesis chapter 1, I'll read from verse 27 to 30. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him, male and female, created he them. So we are already seeing the pattern, male and female. We are living in a world where we have got politicians who cannot define a man or a woman. But the Garden of Eden is the blueprint. And he created as male and female. God blessed them, and God said unto them, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the fowl of the air and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth. And God said, behold, I have given you every herb-bearing seed which is upon the face of the earth, and every tree in the which is the fruit of the tree yielding seed, to you it shall be for meat. So God gave the food, Genesis 1:29, and it was the herbs and the fruits with seeds inside of them, and they were supposed to be for the meat. And we see in Genesis chapter 2, again, reading from verse 8 and verse 9, and the Lord God planted a garden eastward in Eden, and there he put man whom he had formed, and out of the ground made the Lord God to grow every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food. The tree of life was also in the midst of the garden. So for God's people in the garden, Adam and Eve, what was entertainment was to see God's handiwork. The devil has got a way of trying to replace things, but it is the Garden of Eden that God designed for happiness, for fulfillment, for recreation, for all things that humanity may need. And everything ever since has been man and the enemy of souls, the devil, trying to replace this concept. In fact, it's a concept that is so perfect, Sister White says, man has never been able to improve on it. And we'll see more and more of that as we move forward. But we are not in any position to be able to improve on the concept of garden, the garden. And this is, I think, from Genesis chapter 1 to chapter 3, that's where we find the concepts that we have been teaching as our health message as the Adventists, which is the New Start system. And it's a message that we do push quite a lot. We push we have got this magazine designed by one of the brethren. We buy it and we use it as an entering wedge, as we know that the health message is an entering wedge, especially on the streets. But of interest is the New Start here, which I like to assume that we all know. Start with trusting God, rest, and our rest takes the form of good night's sleep. 8 hours recommended for men, and even I mean, some men could according to sleep hygienists, could do with 6, but they say women require a little bit more. I don't know why that is the case. And this was in Eden, the rest element, but also fresh air. They had untainted, uncompromised air. Then temperance. Our grandmother Eve proved not to be that temperate, and even Adam. That's why we're in the situation that we are in, where we are talking about the gospel and redemption. We needed to be redeemed because otherwise we deserve to die. Then sunlight. Again, you are seeing what they are doing with chemtrails and trying to reflect the sun back into space. But we know that it is the sunlight that is the source of our health. And interesting, during COVID, you were not allowed to be out in the open, stay outside, be very afraid. That was the mantra. So basically, they are destroying health, and now it's becoming more and more clear as the evidence comes, even with some of the poisons that they've been injecting in people. Then water, we need it clean. In fact, at the back of this magazine, we've got another chart that we like to use quite a lot, which is the pH chart of different foods. And obviously, you recognize that our bodies are on pH 7, which is neutral, apart from maybe the gallbladder, which is acidic. But our bodies in general, the blood, we are pretty neutral when we are functioning properly. When you've got enough water, enough exercise, no worries. And we are also more than 80% water, which is also what this earth is mostly constituted of. 80% of the earth is water. So God created our habitat in anticipating what our needs would be. But it will be interesting that when you see all the alkalis, Dr. Sebi was advocating for an alkali diet. These are all the foods from the Garden of Eden, which are consistent with health and healing. And the lower down you go down the scale to zero even, the reds is basically what the industry is promoting for us to buy your McDonald's and all that. And we also understand that this is pathogenesis happens in acidic conditions. So we use this, we buy this to basically speak to the people, especially with the aids of the blue zones. And there's a Netflix documentary that we have promoted and captioned quite a few times about blue zones, Okinawa, Japan, Sardinia in Italy, Icaria in Greece, and Nicoya in Costa Rica. And one of our very own, Loma Linda in California. But we know what's happening in Loma Linda right now. This is all dying off. That's why we need a revival of our message, the health message, the right hand of the gospel. And it needs to be attached back to the gospel. I've been lamenting the case that most of the medical missionaries across the world work very separately to those who are pushing the gospel. And that is the legacy of John Harvey Kellogg. And ever since, we have never had a total union between health message and the Three Angels message. But it is also part of the message and a part of this loud cry, as you are going to see as we progress. So we have got the Garden of Eden as the blueprint, and that's the cream of the crop, the tippy top of the gospel. And man has not been able to improve on it. In fact, whatever the scientific research has come in has been to the effect of ruining this, but this has been proved by these blue zones that I mentioned. They live as closely as possible to the Advent message and to the Eden settings. It will be interesting. You will find out the people in Sardinia, it's been discovered that those who live up the mountains, up the hills and mountains, live longer than those who live up the valley. And it's clear. That's one of the 8 laws of health, exercise. Some of their staircases could be up to the roof of our houses. So from day 1 to day about 100, when they die, they're literally climbing those stairs every day. Whereas in comparison, here in the UK, most of us have got a very sedentary life. We go to the workplace in a car, we go and sit on the sofa and watch TV, and we don't exercise at all. And hence, they have been getting these results. They may break a few of the health laws in those places, but because the full aggregate of what they are doing is more towards a positive trajectory, they are benefiting that much. So that's the news that I had not finished the rest, but I'm sure I'm talking to people who know it. But just in case, let me just talk about the exercise and nutrition, which are the last 2. And all these were provided for by God in the Garden of Eden. They had the most natural. it's also interesting to know that the blue zones actually do not have gyms. None of them have nursing homes or gyms, and their exercise is pretty natural movements. They work in the garden, squatting, the bending, and all that is giving them not just good health but longevity. Whereas we are being told that we need to pay and go to the gym. We drive to the gym to go and walk on a treadmill. Like I once saw a meme of a child finding an African child finding that very ridiculous. We even have to drive elsewhere to go and have a walk. So that's how inconvenient the city living is. We've got an alternative. Someone was telling me that Brother Neil Nedley had, what do you call it, patented the 8 laws of health. I don't know how far true it is, but if true, I think that would be a crime against the gospel. But they're claiming that he had trademarked it. I'm hoping it's not correct, because it is the right hand of the gospel, and we grew up knowing the New Start program. I was actually disappointed when I first came into the country because I was hearing some of our sound bites on BBC and Channel 4 and all those food programs. You are what you eat. But this is what our message has been from the beginning. But alternatively, we also have a very good acronym to go by, God's Plan, which is G for godly trust, or trust in divine power, O for open air, again, very same. It's an identical thing. And sunlight. That's the S, God's Plan, and the P for the plan, proper rest, again, Shabbat, Sabbath, and a good work-life balance, and sleep. Then lots of water, clean water, which we barely have a lot of, especially here in England, and especially with fluoride that they've been adding for years, and it's been messing up with people's hormones and you name it. But also, they've been putting estrogen in water. Some of you may already know this, and overall, the city living has not done us any favors. Yeah, A is always temperate, so again, temperance, temperance, being temperate, and nutrition, proper diet, proper nutrition, and this is men's original diet. Well, not quite this, but it looked a bit like this. This has a lot of human tempering. And while I'm at it, I might as well just say, in preparation for those who are in the city particularly, we may need to also start stocking up on seeds, real good seeds that have not been tampered with. Might be able to put some websites in the chat as well. There's a few companies somewhere in America of organic seeds. What are they called again? I know Amazon and all that are trying to counterfeit that, but there are people who have been keeping those seeds. When I remember the name of the seeds, I'll tell you in terms of the generic name. Yeah, so that's again another acronym that we use: God's Plan and New Start. These we own. These are a gift from God, and they are an effective witness, especially if we can actually live them. And some of us, like we said, we can hardly live them because of all the other constraints, contaminated air, contaminated water, you name it. But there are other benefits to country living, which is it is an aid to moral and social security. And it is also, yeah, heirloom seeds is the term that I was looking for. Thank you very much, Antwi. Is it sister or brother? It's heirloom seeds, and there's a few websites that sell proper heirloom seeds. And just for your on information, what I've grown in the garden is not heirloom, but I've been gathering some seeds as well, just in preparation. I'm hoping that a lot of them would last the course until God opens up a way. But there is heirloom seeds that we need to be buying. The other benefits, like I said, food security. It is also a major moral and social security. How moral? Again, all around us is sounds and sights and smells of sin and dissipation in the city. And I don't know if I told you this, but let me just put this. I'm going to not use a lot of Sister White, and the reason is the people that we are trying to address as well may be people who may be prejudiced against Ellen White, but the aim of my presentation is to actually show that this is simply a biblical thing, and those who have read Sister White knows that all that she writes is biblical. But at least we should be able to defend the scriptures without having to need to lean on the spirit of prophecy. And I know I started with the spirit of prophecy, but all that I want to bring from now henceforth, I'll be basing it on the Bible primarily. So it is a source of medication. Our medicine chest is our garden. Again, I've already read that from Genesis, but Ezekiel 47 verse 12, it says, and the river upon the bank thereof, on the side, on this side and on that side shall grow all trees for meat. So meat is an old word for food. And whose leaf shall not fade, neither shall the fruit thereof be consumed. It shall bring forth new fruit according to his months, because their waters, they have issued out of the sanctuary, and the fruit thereof shall be for meat, and the leaf thereof shall be for medicine. So we find our food and medicine is in plants, and that's what Ezekiel is talking about. In fact, in the Garden of Eden, we talked about the tree of life. That was the whole purpose of the tree of life, that was to perpetuate life forever. But other plants have got capacity to perpetuate life as long as possible in the best of condition and health as possible. Then it is also a source of financial security. It is a source of generating an income. But country living is a very solid platform for evangelism. It is a witnessing platform. We should have an outpost. What we've been finding, though, is the interest in country living is a lot more in the world than it is in our church right now. And I've been saying that people have been actually questioning if it's still a valid thing, even in the Adventist church, but especially more so in the other churches, evangelicals. But especially since COVID, we've been seeing a lot of people who have got not just an interest, but are doing things that are practical. I've even seen Zimbabweans who are building country homes, not necessarily for the spiritual benefits or anything, but they are just fed up with the city's broken down systems, and they're literally just going off grid. I've been meeting people who are investing quite a lot in country living, and a lot of them have not actually gotten the full crux of the matter, the mark of the beast crisis that is rearing its head. In fact, yesterday I watched a video from one of the people that we have interviewed and given books, and his name is Richard Bobs, and he was actually saying he had gone to a farm to look for a country living place. We gave them in books about 3 years ago in Peterborough, but we've met him a lot of times elsewhere. I think we met him in Swindon, and recently it was just up in Stoke with Barbara O'Neill, because He's got an affinity with Barbara O'Neill and the Good Food Project. And he was smoking his pipe away because obviously he is not got that conviction, but he's not the only person. They were people that we were meeting over the years. Some of them are even forming communities complete with doctors and artisans and nurses, mechanics and plumbers. They're forming their own complete communities at the back of COVID and what they saw to be a threat to their security. So people are seeing that and are doing the right thing, and God would direct them step by step from there until they get to the gospel. Yeah. So moving on, there's another element of our health which we find very difficult to do, which is called earthing or grounding. And a lot of people have had problems, electrical problems, but we are electrical beings and the ground is electrical. And earthing has been known to balance electrolytes in our physical processes and physical bodies. So it's very difficult to do it in the city. Yeah, walking barefoot. In the countryside, the ground is clean, and you don't have this tarmac, which can be very painful. So it's much easier to just set off from your house and go for a walk barefoot. And as nature intended, the rubber actually insulates because rubber is insulation. So we are insulated from the ground, but we're supposed to be in communion with the environment that God created. And it results in a lot of health complications. Yeah, so these principles were all found in the Garden of Eden. And like I said, man has not been able to improve on that. It is as God has ordained it. So this is what we ought to be doing. But then from Adam and Eve, we go to Cain, and we are told that Cain was the first man to build a city. And he called the city after his son Enoch. That's in Genesis chapter 4. So the whole concept of cities, we are seeing consistently that it is about rebellion. Cain rebelled, he went to Nod, built a city called Enoch. And to that, his progeny, Lamech, added polygamy and polygyny, whatever it was. So we see the concept of seed and harvest as this principle grew in Genesis chapter 6. We see that God is already lamenting why he had created man. And that's when Noah is called to build the ark. Again, the corruption given had come from Cain, and the concept taught in Genesis chapter 6 is that the sons of God, which were the children of Seth and the other children of Abraham, obedient ones, started getting married to the sons of men. And these were the corrupt progeny of Cain and Enoch and Lamech. They got married to the daughters of man. So again, seed and harvest, the seeding of Eve and Adam and Lamech and Cain and Enoch were small matters, but seeds multiply. And we find in chapter 6, like a cancer, it had overrun the whole of the human population, and Noah was found to be faithful. So God destroyed that world as a result. But we see with Noah, again, Canaan or Ham, his heart was not right, and he got a curse. And the brothers were faithful. So we see each time there's a division there, a great controversy between good and evil. And the children of Canaan wanted to remove all the restraints of the laws of God, just like you are saying is right in our situation. Every restraint of the commandments, people want to rid themselves of the constraints as they consider them of God's guidelines and commandments. And they did that, and that's when they started building a China. And you have Nimrod building that tower, Babel. And God this time called Abraham out of this place, a corrupt place. And Abraham was called to country living. I'm going to talk about it as well at the end, but he was called to country living. And he went as a nomad in the land of Canaan. He headed west from where he was, from China, which is Babylon, Iraq, Heir of the Chaldeans, which is the call out of Babylon. And in Canaan, he had followers in his household, workers. He was a rich man. He had a strong enough army to defeat Egyptians. So he was not a small-time man, even before the promise was given, but he was a country-living man, and God blessed him, and he was a wealthy man. So this is the first call out of Babylon, and we find that in Genesis chapter 12, from verse 1. And he came out with his father Terah and his nephew Lot. And they tarried quite a long time at Haran. Some say because Terah was getting too old and he couldn't move, but there seemed to have been a problem there at Haran. And as soon as Terah died, they carried on traveling. But Adam, in Genesis chapter 15, verse 13, is promised by God that his posterity, his children, his progeny, were going to repeat his journey, but this time from Egypt. It reads, Abraham, know of a surety, and he said unto Abraham, know for a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in the land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them for 400 years. So that's the focus of the captivity. But I want you to see, as they went into the captivity, thanks to the slave king Joseph, they were not to mingle with the Egyptians in their cities because their ways were totally at odds with each other. What was livestock and sacrifice for the Hebrews was a god to the Egyptians. So, and they lived together in wherever it is, in Alexandria or wherever the cities were during that time. You would be accused of killing the Egyptian god or sacrificing to God, and hence the arrangement and the contingency was that God provided for them Goshen, and Goshen was a country living place for the Israelites. And as long as they held on to Goshen, there was no trouble whatsoever to them. But fast forward, we saw a Pharaoh who did not know Joseph, and they started mixing and mingling, and you found them as employees and then as slaves, and they sold all their land, and they became enslaved. In chapter 20 of Genesis, we actually found Lot right settled in the city. with no cattle in sight. And there is an object lesson between the two of them. We are going to be saved either as an Abraham or as a Lot, especially as parents. But you saw that Abraham kept to his country heritage, and Lot was absorbed in the affairs of the city. No doubt Lot did a lot of good work in Sodom, but to what end? And the work that he could have done, and he kept living in the country, he could have done a much more effective work, as we see in the illustration of both men. Abraham lost nothing and nobody, and he died at a good age and was buried peacefully. Lot did not just lose everything, but he lost everyone. He lost a wife. If we go by the spirit of prophecy, there were even children who were already married, who he left in the city as patriarchs and prophets. But he also lost the daughters that he came out with. Like they say, you can take girl out of Sodom, but you could never take Sodom out of the girl. That mentally, even though they were physically touted to be virgins, mentally they were as sodomite as it comes, and hence they made the father drunk and seduced him and bore children that became a thorn in Israel's flesh, the Ammonites, Moabites. It is a very serious story. Not just everything, but everyone, I reckon. He lost everyone. And that story has been repeated within the brethren. There are people who came from other countries into the United Kingdom. Their children used to fellowship. Their children are in the world right now as we speak. And it's a very, very sad story, especially because there's not been any present truth, any fresh bread within our churches as well. So we have not been, apart from the temptations that the cities present, there's not been even any way to shield our children, because thanks to the Jesuits, we have been preaching a very watered down message for a long time. And this is why we need to go back to the old-time religion, to the faith that was once delivered unto the saints, to primitive godliness. So there we can unpack a lot, but what I'm simply saying, you can either be an Abraham or you can be a Lot. And right now, a lot of us are following the example of Lot, myself included. I can't wait to get a move, but still stuck in a sense in the place where we are. Then we trace it to even the captivity during Babylonian captivity. There was a 3 angels message given, and by the time Daniel, by the time Cyrus was defeating and conquering Babylon, Daniel was already in the country at the river, is it Ulai Hedical, by the palace in Shushan. Some would like to call it Susa. So he was already in the he was already in the country living setting, ready for the destruction of Babylon. And that's where we ought to be heading, because Babylon is now just about to be destroyed. But going forward towards the New Testament, I want to remember I said I was just going to do a scoping exercise, justifying it. And when Jesus was born, we also learned that Jesus had to be raised in the country through the direction of God, and Joseph chose to raise him in Nazareth. Judea was a very cosmopolitan city, the region during that time, a trade route, and a lot of people from right across the world, which was basically a shouting city. But Nazareth was a little village, and he grew up in the hills. Again, Christ had a very country upbringing. That's according to Luke chapter 2, 39, 40. Again, you can read this from Desire of Ages. I'm going to skip over, but Christ was raised in the country, and if God realized that living in Judea would imperil his environment, sounds that he was exposed to, the sights again, but also he would have been exposed to a lot of the enemies of the message had he been in the city. And with his claims, remember, he'd just come out of Egypt because Herod wanted to kill him. So country living was his shield in Nazareth. And it was a pretty rundown place and a pretty poverty-stricken place. Then, when Jesus was about to complete his ministry, he gave also a country living message. And that country living message, you find it in the book of Matthew chapter 24 and Luke 21. In Matthew chapter 24, they came to him and they wanted to brag about the temple. And he said, not a stone is going to be left upon another. And they said, when will these things be? And what shall be the sign of the end of the world? And so Matthew 24 is Jesus cataloging the process of time from his time to the second coming. Same applies with Luke 21, the variation being how they worded the threat, especially the mark of the beast crisis threat. Matthew 24, 15 to 21 says, and when ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place, whosoever readeth, let him understand. Let them which be in Judea flee into the mountains. Let him which is on the housetop not come down to take anything out of his house, neither let him which is in the field return back and take his clothes. Woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days. Pray ye that your flight be not in winter, neither on the Sabbath day, for then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. So this has got a dual application, as we know. This is the destruction of Jerusalem, AD 67, AD 70, but it is also the mark of the beast crisis. And we get the sense that we are being surrounded. So Jesus is giving a country living message, and he says, flee to the mountains. Then, like I said, the context is Matthew chapter 24, 3, is they're saying, when are these things going to be? And what shall be the sign for the end of the world? And that's what he's pretty much addressing. Luke chapter 21 says, when you see Jerusalem compassed with armies, again, that's the sexiest moment, and that's the tightest moment. But also, we had a feel of that during COVID. And there is not a lack of trying on them to proscribe and our freedom of movement free speech. In fact, all our freedoms, and may unpack that a little bit more with the forthcoming, verses. But there's another point, which is most of the great men of the past ages came from country living backgrounds. I'm just going to read it from Sister White. Again, it's biblical because she put it so concisely. I've been trying to avoid putting the spirit of prophecy because of some of the audience where this might end up. But this one is undisputable in any way. So with the great majority of the best and noblest men of all ages, read the story of Abraham, Jacob, and Joseph, and Moses, David, Elijah. Study the lives of the men of later times who have most worthily filled positions of trust and responsibility. The men whose influence has been the most effective for the world's uplifting. That's from Ministry of Healing, also found in Country Living. All these men were from country living backgrounds. How many of these were reared in the country homes? They knew little of luxury. They did not spend their youth in amusements. Many were forced to struggle with poverty and hardship. They early learned to work, and their active life in the open air gave vigor and elasticity to their faculties. Forced to depend upon their own resources, they learned to combat difficulties and to surmount obstacles. They gained courage and perseverance. They learned the lesson of self-reliance and self-control. Sheltered in a great degree from evil associations, they were satisfied with the natural pleasures and wholesome companionships. They were simple in their tastes and temperate in their habits. They were governed by the principle, and they grew up pure and strong and true. When called to their life work, they brought to it physical and mental power, buoyancy of spirit, ability to plan and execute, and steadfastness in resisting evil that made them a positive power for good in the world. So we find that all these men, not just from the Bible, but even reformers, were from the rural background. We know about Luther and Zwingli. Luther's father was it the miner, or was it Zwingli's father? But they all were in the cottages and living quite a meager rural life. Talk about William Miller, a farmer, a retired soldier, first at the East. He had a lot of wealth, and if you read his story in our founding, a great controversy, he did not gain from being a minister of the gospel, and it was not for pecuniary gain, but his wealth was heavily taxed for that. There's a man that you may or may not know about. I've read his book, his only book that I know about, and his name is David Paulson, second generation Seventh-day Adventist. Again, he's got a compelling story about this. He grew up on a farm. His father made him as a little boy to rear the cattle. He was, and most of his friends had a pony that they rode upon as they were corralling the cattle. And he said he prayed for a pony, and he trusted God for the pony. And every time he saw a pony come down the road, he would start to thank God, thinking that it was his pony. But that prayer was never answered. But he said many others of his prayers were answered afterwards, and he learned to trust God. And here's what he said. He said, I thank God for not answering my prayer about the pony, because he said, my legs and feet are as strong as wood. And that was from chasing after the cattle. Had the prayer about the pony been answered, it would have been the pony that got all the muscles. And he is a man that worked for his schooling until he became a qualified doctor under the tutelage of Kellogg. And he didn't follow Kellogg, he followed Christ. He's one of the most powerful persons I've had the encounter to read about. It's a memoir that he wrote and was converted into a book. David Paulson, I think it's called Footprints of Faith, I think. Footprints of Faith. And it's just showing how God led in his life. But he was just demonstrating the power of country living. In fact, at some point, he had other students who were working with him. They couldn't afford the fees of their education, so they would work for the colleges like we did with most of our Adventist institutions. We had that in Africa when I was growing up too. They would work for the college and then get free tuition that way by donating their labor. And there was a time when the college that he was attending could not afford to put them through. The other ones, because they were a bit lazy, they had the habit of saying, oh, just give it to David, he likes to work. But when the college made the decision to cut them, they couldn't do so with him. They said he was the only person that was kept in school while they couldn't afford to keep the rest of them. Footprints of Faith. You can also listen to it on Ellen White Audio, which is that link. Let me just talk about it. It's a very powerful resource. It just not got Ellen White's books. It's got also pioneer materials, the ones that have been studiously hid away from us from the time of Uriah Smith until the current General Conference. And some of the messages, especially A.T. Jones Wagner and others, Haskell, as well as A.G. Daniels. It is the message of righteousness of Christ, which is the loud cry of the third angel. People think it's loud cry is a future phenomenon. It's as old as 1888. It's the 1888 message, which is the righteousness of Christ. But I digress a little bit. Yeah. So most of the men who had accolades of making a positive change biblically and historically, a lot of them had rural training. So Revelation 13, we find the crisis, the buying and selling crisis enforced by the first and second beast, which is basically United States of America and the Vatican. Revelation 13, the buying and selling crisis, the work of the papacy. We find that it is the stated aim of the papacy to gain control of the governments. I could even start with, I know we put a full video about this, but it was the papacy through Edward Menderhouse during the First World War, who was a Jesuit or a Jesuit representative, and he was partnered with Woodrow Wilson, the president, and the aim was to get United States in the, to get hold of the United States. I don't want to go too much into the detail, but basically it was the aim of the, what do you call it again, the League of Nations, to get the United States in. And they were, as there has been, there were there was a senator who fought that, and that did not go through. So the contingency was to facilitate another war, Second World War, and that's how the United Nations was formed. United States was readier, and they are in charge. They have created all these other groupings that they have put the world into, which are they are decoys, unelected, unaccountable governments. But yeah, United Nations with the Lucis Trust, that's a Luciferian trust, and I'm not talking about ADRA and its involvement with that, and how we have been getting money from the world to do the work. I mean, to do their work, their bidding, and while neglecting our own work. In Africa alone, there are these groupings like ECOWAS, SADC. ECOWAS is Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, and SADC is Southern Africa Development Community, and COMESA, which is Common Market of Eastern and Southern Africa, and so on and so forth. And there are these bodies all over the world, basically, which are the fingers and hands of the Vatican to bring the countries into submission. Then I just want to scope a few maybe of not so current events. Pope Francis, if you remember him in 2014, he had a call with that South African evangelical at an evangelical convention where there was millions of people, and he called a video call on an iPhone. This is after the delivery by Tony Palmer, the South African pastor, who I believe was a Jesuit and who died under very suspicious circumstances, Tony Palmer. And he had said,
we know that the first 1,000 years there was one church, it was called the Catholic Church, and the word Catholic means universal, it doesn't mean Roman. Catholic means, if you're born again, raise your hand if you're born again. You're a Catholic. Take back, redeem what belongs to you. We are Catholics. And then there was the split at the end of the first millennium. We had the Orthodox, East and West, two churches. Then 500 years later, we have Luther and his protest. Three churches in 1,500 years. Three denominations, not three churches. And then, from Luther's protest onwards, 33,000 new denominations. In 1999, the Roman Catholic Church and the Protestant Lutheran Church signed an agreement that brought an end to the protest. Luther believed that we were saved by grace through faith alone. Amen. But that's not it. The Catholic Church believed that we were saved by works. And that was the protest. In 1999, they wrote this together. Because in the Protestant church, we had a lot of cheap salvations. People were getting born again, but no fruit whatsoever. And because we didn't even look for fruit, it wasn't the issue, because it wasn't necessary for salvation. And no, it's not. But it's a good judge if you are saved. So what these two churches did, they put the two definitions together. Listen to it. I'm reading verbatim from the Catholic Vatican website. Justification means that Christ himself is our righteousness, in which we share through the Holy Spirit in accord with the will of the Father. Together we, Catholics and Protestants, Lutherans, believe and confess that by grace alone, in faith in Christ's saving works, and not because of any merit on our part, we are accepted by God and receive the Holy Spirit, who renews our hearts while equipping and calling us to good works. This brought an end to the protest of Luther. Brothers and sisters, Luther's protest is over. Is yours? In 1999, this was signed. by the Lutheran Church, the Federation Worldwide. Later, about 5 years later, the Worldwide Methodists signed the same agreement.
He basically managed to shrink the church into Catholic, and then the schism, according to him, created another church, another denomination, which is the Orthodox, and then Luther. So he skips all the bits about actual Protestantism, and even the Waldenses, who were not even Protestants, but rather representatives of the faith that was once delivered to the saints, they claim their heritage to the disciples, and not to in any way, shape, or form connected to Rome. But he was saying Luther's protest, so he called it Luther's protest, and he said it's over. And we are finding more and more after 2014 that clearly, on an official corporate level, yes, the protest might seem to have died down. Then fast forward, we now have the second Trump administration. Well, the first Trump administration is when we had Pope Francis again address Congress for the first time, who is the first American Pope. Then we've got the Project 2025, and you can see how the steps are moving very quickly towards a total union of church and state in America, and obviously in the world, because America has always been the target, because it is the emblem of Protestantism. And you can, there's a Project 2025 tracker, which is tracking events on how their aims, which are pernicious and deleterious to our freedom, how many of those have been fulfilled. I will not go through that, but we're just seeing these current movements uniting church and state. We also have been following the CBDC, Central Banking Digital Currencies tracker, and every country is at some significant stage, one stage or the other, of implementing this, which we know is the shutting in of the gate. Revelation chapter 13 is the buying and selling, and so they can control buying and selling, they needed a digital platform. I want you to notice that when John was writing this 2,000 years ago, it was practically impossible for anyone to enforce any mandate on buying and selling. In fact, dare I say, in 2019, as COVID was approaching, it was impossible to enforce it. That's why they had to stick to the psychological operation, the psyopsis that they did. And people psychologically submitted, but there was no way they could have enforced everything that they claimed. But fast forward 3 years later, and now 5 years, it's really practical. We complete now with the EU digital wallet. And again, they are using these unelected governments, and like I say, these world groupings, which are all brainchildren of the United Nations and a brainchild of the papacy, which is a usurpation, and emphasizing less on national sovereignty and personal sovereignty, and pushing the Catholic common good, which is basically the Sunday law crisis. So we go to the CBDC tracker, and they are just about to do that. I think, was it Ursula von der Leyen, or can't remember who it was in the EU, who said, now we've got the wallet, we don't know what we can put inside it, digital wallet. And I saw a comment on social media saying the digital wallet is like a solution looking for a problem. So you say, oh, we've made the solution. Now, where are the problems? Where is the problem? But such is the dramatic world we are actually living in. Then there's 3 things that have been treated by the world as a joke, as Donald Trump is never taken seriously, and that's probably the reason why he's in the office. But he joked with 3 things. he joked about Gaza, where he had an AI-generated image of himself as a golden image. And he's saying we are entering the golden age. And this is resonant with Bible prophecy. Indeed, Daniel chapter 3, the golden image in the plain of Judah. And we see that it was a type of the mark of the beast crisis, which is a fiery furnace with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I don't like calling them those names. Mishael, Ananiah, and Azariah being thrown in the fiery furnace. Then he did another jest as well, where he made an image of himself as a king. And then another one as a pope. That was all before we had a new pope, especially when it was the transition between Francis and Leo. It's the image of the beast fully formed, almost fully formed. This is, I don't know when the Capitol building was built, but that's probably 7 years ago. Sorry, more than 300 years ago, I'm sorry. And this is how the image has been forming, but the image is almost complete, because now, apart from Trump's jokes, which are not jokes at all, because all of them are prophetic, America was meant to be a nation without a king, which is one of the two horns, republicanism, and a church without a pope, which is Protestantism. That's the two horns of the lamb-like beast. But it spoke like a dragon. Look, and I've done this for a few times now, especially since we went to Warwick to distribute some books to the farmers. And there was a lot that was happening even with Francis then. But even now more so, because the great controversy, each day that passes by, it becomes more and more relevant, because more of its predictions are unpacked. So this was a long time ago. In infrastructure alone, America had formed an image. Just like here, you look like it's a perfect reflection, or maybe in the water, of the two. There's the Vatican and Capitol building. In front of the Vatican, St. Peter's Basilica, is the obelisk and the Washington Monument. I was reading somewhere, there might be different sources, but it was actually the Vatican, from what I hear, which donated the obelisk to the United States of America, or conveyed from Egypt. And that's, again, Egypt and Babylon. That sign is a very vulgar sign for those who know what the obelisk actually is and what it means spiritually. It's a very vulgar sign. It's rottenness. Yeah. So not only just this, but now, for the joke alone, of Trump being golden image and being a king and then a pope, even though it's artificial intelligence. I want you to see the significance of this. Based on the Constitution, even Kennedy would not have congratulated a pope, and he was a Catholic. And obviously they didn't like him. Story for another day, how he died and how they made him to, move on. But even Vance, J.D. Vance, based on his oath of office, because the oath says he should be defending the American Constitution from enemies, both foreign and local and indigenous. And he was being questioned by a Catholic presenter, and he said he couldn't kiss the Pope's ring.
I am a Catholic. I believe that he, meaning Pope Leo, is actually the shepherd of 1.4 billion Catholics. And so there are things like bowing before him, kissing the ring, that are signs of respect for a spiritual father. Okay. But on the world stage, I'm not there as J.D. Vance, a Catholic parishioner. I'm there as the Vice President of the United States and the leader of the President's delegation to the Pope's inaugural Mass. And so, it was interesting. Some of the protocols about how I respond to the Holy Father were much different than how I might respond to the Holy Father. How might you might respond to the Holy Father purely in your capacity as a citizen. The protocol is that American presidents and vice presidents do not bow before foreign leaders do not kiss any rings. And obviously, given our history, you can appreciate that. So no sign of disrespect, but
Right.
important to observe the protocols of the country that I love and that I'm representing and that I serve as Vice President of the United States.
And kissing the ring, according to the Book of Kings, is worshipping. That's a form of worship. Kissing the ring of power. So he basically refused to kiss, and he mentioned history. But what history is that? It is the history of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, the American Constitution, which we know is going to be repudiated based on the spiritual prophecy, based on Revelation chapter 13. America will lose its lamb-like elements and speak like a dragon, and it's beginning to speak like a dragon as we speak. So just to compound that picture, we now have an American Pope, the first United States of America Pope. And this, if this is not the compounding of the formation of the image of the beast, then nothing else could be that. So America has reared up an image of the beast. But in the process, like I said, the papacy has got these groupings, and one of the interesting one is the EU. And if you Googled, especially before COVID, before they started censoring, if you just typed in the Tower of Babel, up came the offices and the headquarters of the EU in Belgium. And it is designed after the Tower of Babel. I had one of the MEPs was saying they failed in Genesis chapter 11, 12, but we are going to succeed. I couldn't give you that source, but yeah, there's someone who said that we are going to succeed. But they designed it after the artist impression of the Tower of Babel, which is basically Babylon. So they are literally just telling us that it's Babylon. And the interesting, there is a bull and a woman riding the bull. That's Europa. And that Europa is very resonant with Revelation chapter 17, the woman, the Vatican, riding the beast, the governments of the world. And that's Revelation 13, we're skipping over to Revelation 17. The papacy is riding that beast. Mystery. Her name is Mystery Babylon, the mother of all harlots. And riding is an authority. Is a show of authority, a show of power. This is why, even for the first time ever, because there were two churches that would not join the World Council of Churches or any such operatives. And that's the papacy and the Adventist Church. And the Adventist Church has been claiming that we are observers. I believe we are members, but we have been pretending because it was not time to reveal it, because it would cause a lot of, eyeballs and a lot of resistance. But now they may as well just say we are full members, especially complete with the ADRA being a full member of the United Nations and it's a privileged position. We are going to do another video just unpacking that. But we have mentioned it a few times, how we should have never had ADRA in the first place. And so we're seeing these developments are showing us that, yeah, the time is ripe. And this boils down to, it's Revelation chapter 18. Revelation chapter 18 is obviously not a separate subject to Revelation chapter 17, just a continuation. But if you read from verse 1 to verse 4, which verse 1 to verse 4, it says, "And after these things, I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lightened with his glory." So that's the loud cry message. And that angel, like the three angels message, the fourth angel is basically human instrumentalities, primarily preaching liberty, Christ our righteousness, which we see in Revelation chapter 14. Fear God and give him glory, for his hour of his judgment is come, and worship him who created the heaven, the earth, and the sea, and the fountains of water. Then fallen is Babylon, is fallen. Then the mark of the beast, warning, whosoever shall receive the mark shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God that is poured out without mixture. But what is that? A different way of expressing that is to say, as Rome, Babylon rises, there is an equal and opposite movement that should happen, which is God's conscientious children then rise to the occasion. And I'm not talking about the corporate SDA church, because we have proven that it is not the case. Just like in the first advent, it was the Magi, the Babylonians, who preached Christ is come, joy to the world. And it was also the shepherds who were ready. The Pharisees, the Sadducees were not ready for it. And even now, we are seeing that COVID opened many eyes. But the people who had their eyes opened were largely not our people. There's people on the streets, same ones who are looking for country homes, the same ones who have been searching the truth about injections and chemtrails and weather manipulation and all the monetary corruption that's been happening, that we've been implicated as ADRA as well, including human trafficking and supporting illegal migration, funded for by USAID, the Biden administration, and the United Nations again, and ADRA has been all over it. And then there is the case of injection. So the people who are waking up, God's people, are not just Adventists. It is Christ who says, "Some sheep I have that are not in this fold, but I'll find them, and you shall be one fold." And there's plenty of people in the world a lot more people who are awake to these things in the world than inside our church organization, both in the present truth and even the nominal circles or even conference circles. There is far more, to my surprise and to my utter chagrin, more people who are open to answering the call in the world right now. So Revelation chapter 18 again. "After these things, I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lighted with his glory. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon is fallen, and is become a habitation of devils and a hold of every foul spirit and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. This is not talking about birds and unclean animals. It's talking about people. Babylon is indeed Rome, both papal and pagan. And in another place, I could prove that, but it is that both pagan and papal. In fact, Peter wrote and say, referring to Rome, he wrote that Rome was actually Babylon. That's in the King James Version, so it doesn't need much proof. But what am I saying? I am saying this is the time when this message is to be given, and it's a country living message. That message encompasses all these experiments with Bill Gates and the monopolies that are being formed, which you'll find in country living, again, which I may not refer to, but all the farm massive purchases. Some people are even saying that Bill Gates may have as much as 60% of agricultural land in America. And since the Ukrainian war, Ukraine has lost 30% of land to companies that are controlled directly by Larry Fink and BlackRock. The same Larry Fink and Bill Gates who came to the UK, to Downing Street in November last year. And less than 2 months later, the farmers were under attack. 20% inheritance tax, and all the subsidies that they have depended on since 1979 gone. Sorry, 1973 even gone. And what is the net effect? They are going to be forced to sell these farms. So Babylon is amassing wealth. And talking about Tony Palmer and that video call, I wanted to say, Pope Francis said, remember the story of Joseph. His brothers threw him in the bin, in the hole, in the well, and they sold him. But they came to him during the time of famine, and they had to worship him in order to get some food. And he was referring himself to as Joseph. And how so? This is exactly what he's saying. So Joseph is a type of both good and bad. And this is why they are doing this great reset, fourth industrial revolution, and where Uncle Klaus Schwab has been saying you own nothing by 2030 and you will be happy about it. So they are literally just buying up everything that can be bought. The NHS has been sold left, right, and center by the Conservative government. We've got none of it left. It was bought by a company called Vanguard. Then you got companies like State Street and all these Rothschild, Rockefeller banking dynasties with their many disguises that they don't want you to talk about because apparently it could be construed as anti-something else. But that's what the Vatican has done. Everything is saying Daniel chapter 3, mark of the beast. Everything is saying Revelation chapter 13, buying and selling crisis. Revelation 17, the whore is riding again the nations and upon the many waters. Influence upon the people is right there. So verse 3 says, and all the nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her. I think this could extend to even the COVID crisis, but the wine is teaching, the Catholic doctrine is being taken under the guardianship of the United States government right now as we speak, with especially with the Project 2025 and how quickly they're fulfilling all their whims and wishes. And with very little resistance. Is unlike in 1888 when the loud cry was given by Brother A.T. Jones and even Wagner and others, but A.T. Jones especially, engaging them at a civic and political stage. And the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of their delicacy. So these are the Bill Gates and all the merchants that we're talking about. They've been made rich by these COVID mandates and all this. And we are here, Revelation 18:17. But it's interesting that there are people who are claiming that they are representing A.T. Jones, and they are doing the opposite work of what A.T. Jones did. Canon Diop is in bed with Rome, doing Rome's bidding in the name of A.T. Jones. Religious liberty. We are living this dystopian world of George Orwell, the Orwellian world, 1984, where everything is the opposite of what it says on the tin. If they say safe and effective, it means you are going to die. And if they say the ministry of peace, it means war, and so on and so forth. Verse 4 then says, and I heard another voice from heaven saying, come out of here, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not her plagues. This is the centerpiece of the message. This is the loud cry of the third angel. It is also the country living message. Come out from among them. So that's the heart of the message. Revelation chapter 18, where do we get it from? I remember saying this was a country living message and I was only a stripling. And this elder lambasted me verbally and said, that's totally different from the country living message. This is, to me, something totally different. He didn't even explain it. And while I appreciate the fact that this is a spiritual call, come out of here, my people, it is also a country living call. In fact, God's church has always needed to be separate from the world. Even Balaam had to acknowledge that God's people were not to be reckoned among the nations. And Paul said in Corinthians, basically, that we should be not reckoned among the nations of the world. And those nations are not just political entities, civic entities. It is also churches. That's why they're called denominations, the key word being nation. We are not to involve ourselves in any ecumenism, but we are to stand separate, only governed by God, and thus says the Lord. For thus says the state, or thus says the church, cannot replace and thus says the Lord. I was doing some evangelism and I met a young lady. I started talking to her about health, and she shared, I'm going to just abbreviate it, shared a testimony of someone she had met in, I think it was Sheffield or Leeds, and she was local to here. And she said she met some homeless people, and she was just illustrating that she's not judgmental and she's an open person who can talk to anyone. So she met some homeless couple. And long story short, they were in a house that was full of mold and they were struggling financially. They even moved in with the mother of the girlfriend because they were boyfriend and girlfriend. But they decided to go out because they thought they were burdensome. They lived on the street. And they were saying they're starting to do drugs a little bit, but they were really decent people. That's what she was trying to tell me. They did a bit of drugs, but not much, maybe to numb the pain of homelessness or whatever it was. But she said, they said, we discovered one thing. When we were renting that house that we couldn't keep eventually, we were coughing and spluttering all over the place. But as soon as we started living on the streets, all that went away. So they had access to slightly more healthier, even though it was in the city still, but they were outdoors, and that even improved their health, which is a testament to the country living message that we're talking about. If because some of these houses, and Sister White writes a lot about it in Country Living. Like I said, I'm not going to base my arguments mostly on Sister White. I'm going to base them primarily on the scriptures. But yeah, the houses that we live in, a lot of them are causing us a lot of, health issues. Whereas in the country, building the nice sort of houses, but also you spend more time, you're encouraged outdoors. You're encouraged to go outdoors because of more acceptable environments. So yeah, the heart of the message is really Revelation 18, come out of here, my people, which is the call out of Babylon. But like I was saying, the first call out of Babylon was given to Abraham in Genesis chapter 12. And there were people who used to spite me when I first said that, until I studied it and I realized you couldn't have something in Revelation that has not got a precedence. And my path led to Daniel chapter 2 to 3, heir of the Chaldeans. And you realize, well, the Chaldeans, which are the Babylonians, a Neo-Babylonian empire, and Abraham is called from heir of the Chaldeans at Shinar, which is basically where the headquarters of the Neo-Babylonian empire was. So, yeah, that's where the heart of the message is. Let me just read this one again. That's Sister White last day event. And she was writing about the loud cry message, which I'm saying is already here. It's just waiting on us. We are not waiting for God to do anything. God is waiting on us to accept the message. That's why in Revelation chapter 3, he's saying, behold, I stand at the door and knock. We have got it all twisted within the conference circles that we think God is waiting. We are waiting on God or a specific time for God to do anything. God is not waiting. We are not waiting for God. God is waiting for us, in essence. And this is an affirmative statement about it. She said, several have written to me inquiring the message of inquiring if the message of justification by faith is the third angel's message. And I've answered, it is the third angel's message in verity. That's from Selected Message 1, page 372. 8090, also here in Last Day Events. The Lord, in his great mercy, have sent a most precious message to his people through elders E.J. Wagner and A.T. Jones. This message was to bring more prominently before the world the uplifted Savior, the sacrifice for sin, for sins of the world, of the whole world. It presented the justification through faith in surety. It invited the people to receive the righteousness of Christ, which is made manifest in obedience to all commandments. So the righteousness of Christ is made manifest in obedience. But what is it? It is especially accentuated as you see the devil upping the ante, like we are seeing this image of the beast forming. The papacy is getting its prominence and power to rule as a civic power across the world, not just in the Vatican, but as a despot, as it was in the past. As that happens, like the scripture says, when the enemy comes like a flood, God will raise a standard. And God is raising this standard. And that is the righteousness of Christ, which is to meet these things. So if we read John chapter 12, 32, Christ said, and if I be lifted from the earth, I will draw all men unto me. Christ lifted up is the gospel indeed. As the mark of the beast system rears its head, the way to crush the head of the serpent is Christ our righteousness. That's why when Luther went into Rome, he saw Rome, the city of the seven hills, and he said, "Holy Rome, I salute you." And then he went onto that supposed palace staircase, and he was kneeling and crawling like all of them as a papist and a faithful one at that. And that's when he heard the voice in his heart, which said, audibly, he said, the just shall live by faith. And that's from Habakkuk 2, so also echoed in Romans 1, verse 17, and Galatians 3:11, Hebrews 10:13. The just shall live by faith. And that is the righteousness of Christ. Once he heard that, he turned back. He was very shy. He had to stand up very quickly. And he turned back and never again to go to Rome, or never again to be reconciled with the beast. And that's when he started writing statements like, if there is a hell on earth, Rome is built over it. Because you cannot have the faith of Christ and still have any fellowship with Rome. So we are seeing that this is happening right now as we speak. And there needs to be a separation now. We are leaving the shaking. We are living in the period of the loud cry of the third angel. Sister White says it will swell, and the Holy Spirit will be poured in full measure. We are going to see miraculous happenings, but we are not waiting. God is not waiting for a specific time and appointed time or anything like that. He's waiting for you and me to actually avail ourselves. So I wanted to say the great controversy, a huge part of the great controversy is about ownership of land. Because ownership of land, remember, land in the Old Testament is basically salvation. It's the same as the concept of the firstborn, the progenitor of Christ. That's why land when I'm saying the progenitor, I'm talking even about Esau, who really didn't think that it was much to keep his birthright, even though he was firstborn by a few minutes. He didn't fancy it, and he sold it to his younger twin brother. But also, the whole concept of land, remember, land was never sold on a permanent basis, because every year of Jubilee, it would go back. And that's why you have got the story of Ruth. Also, if they had lost and someone was there, you would have a kinsman redeemer. You needed a male figure. Again, the Christology of it. But the land was never sold. So country living, from that perspective, land is salvation. Land is called in the commercial area. In commerce, it's called the means of production. It's part of the means of production. That's why you got the words such as landlord. If you are got land, you are a lord. And in country living, Sister White says, mothers and fathers who own a piece of land and a comfortable home are kings and queens. That's in this context, because we are seeing that the rest of it is going to be slaves and plebs who are going to be driven into these smart cities and so on and so forth. So country living is not got something to do with salvation. It is salvation. And it's not got something to do with evangelism. It is evangelism, indeed. And also the other element of country living, we are changed imperceptibly. It is in country living that you learn from handling the flowers, the patience of looking after even lamps and whatever else you get involved in. It changes your perspective. Just like you said, Brother Ernest, about Nebuchadnezzar in country living. It doesn't change your physical health. It changes your spiritual health. And when your spiritual health changes, you can be a better witness than if you are still polluted with the influence of Babylon. This is why from the beginning, the great controversy has always been between good and evil, light and darkness, truth and error, Christ and Satan. And in a in a summative way, with just summarizing what we have gone through, the war has been carried from Eden, and it will end up in Eden. The purpose being the plan of redemption is a restorative work, is to restore man to his former glory, if not better. So everything that we should be looking at is to get Christ in us, to do us better, to make us better. So it was fought in the Garden of Eden between Eve. I said Eve, even though the scripture says Adam, because Adam is a figurehead, but Eve is where it started. So Eve and Adam versus the serpent, they lost. Then you got Abel versus Cain. And Abel won it in terms of the actual controversy because he was with God. Noah versus the antediluvian world and Satan behind them. Abraham versus the people like Nimrod and Shinar. What are you seeing there? There is only two churches. There is the Catholic Church, and then they're not two churches. There are two entities. There is the Catholic way, and then there is the church. So the universal way is the way that the devil would want to do things. And you find that in chapter 6, the universal way was basically to ignore God's law. And so the universal way, in fact, it was Wagner who was arguing again in the Third Angel's Message in the Loud Cry series. He argued that there could never be a Catholic Church because what is universal is all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. That's what is universal. And all of us are at odds and at enmity with God. That is what is universal. That's what's Catholic. So Catholic Church is a misnomer. And then there's the church. The Greek word for church is the called out people. And the called out people are the remnant, the little remnant. So there is Catholic, then there's the church. So technically, I'm saying the church is not the brick and mortar of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. No, according to the definition in Acts of the Apostles, Sister White says actually the church is where two or three are gathered in my name. People doing the things according to the character of God. The ones you find in John chapter 4, when the woman at the well was speaking with Christ, those who worship him in spirit and in truth. So, because he said, she said to him, our father said, we shall worship him on this mountain, but you say in Jerusalem, he said, a time is coming and it is now that you shall neither worship him on this mountain or in Jerusalem, but those who worship him will worship him in spirit and in truth. So that's the church. And I'm saying the two entities, the light and darkness, Catholicism as a concept, and the church can never mix. The church is those who are doing the work of God. And from Genesis to Revelation, it's always been in the minority. Yeah, so even if you read 2 Corinthians chapter 6:17, wherefore come out of from among them and be ye separate, saith the Lord, and touch not the unclean thing, and I'll receive you. But I'll just conclude here. Sorry for taking that much time. Country living is a means of practical sanctification and preparation. Cities are mission fields, not dwelling places. That's what even Sister White says in Country Living. The cities are to be worked by God's people, not by God's people living in them, but working them from an outpost. A country setting allows for greater dependence on God. You said that earlier on, and less to the worldly system. You won't be asked to get onto this train. You need this pass and all that, and like the COVID fiasco. So is evangelism possible while doing country living? I've already answered that. It is not possible. Country living is evangelism. You cannot separate the two. A more effective work can be done doing country living than city living. And we saw that with Abraham and Lot. Abraham was an effective witness. Lot was a witness. But how effective was it for him and for the people that he witnessed to? So country living is the gospel. It is the everlasting kingdom, and it is the core out of Babylon, Revelation chapter 18, which is the mighty angel from verse 1. And I think I will just end